Imagine stepping onto a treadmill that, actually speeds up specifically because you couldn't afford the right running shoes. So the less you have, the harder you are forced to run just to stay in the exact same place. Welcome to your custom deep dive. Today we're unpacking the architecture of the poverty premium. Our mission here is to explore sources showing poverty isn't just, an empty bank account. It's an active, incredibly expensive penalty across the board financially, psychologically, and legally.
Right. Yeah, it's a brutal concept. It's this compounding trap. I mean, it extracts resources at every single level. Like when you lack upfront capital, you're forced into this cycle of really expensive micro purchases just to survive.
Exactly. I mean, let's look at the raw math of something like a laundrette. If you don't have, say, $400 to just buy a washing machine today, you end up bleeding thousands of dollars in quarters over the next decade. Our sources show relying on public laundrettes carries a 2,561% markup per wash.
2,000%. That is insane.
Yeah. Compared to owning a machine, it's wild. Or payday loans, which basically mechanically trap people by charging 300 to 600% APR just to cover a tiny short-term gap.
It feels like you're being aggressively penalized for not being able to afford, like, the VIP bulk buy club of life.
That's a great way to put it. And the insidious part about that VIP club is that the penalty isn't just retail markups. It's baked into the algorithms that run our lives. Insurance companies use these things called actuarial risk models.
Oh, right. The neighborhood data stuff.
Right. They are basically algorithms based on historical zip code data. So if you live in a lower income neighborhood, the math just automatically assumes you're a higher risk. Just living in an affordable neighborhood in the UK, for instance, can mean paying up to $384 extra a year for car insurance.
So the system actually charges you more purely for having less. And, this lack of capital physically traps people, too. Like, look at San Francisco's housing crisis in our sources. People are enduring raw sewage and toxic mold because they physically cannot afford the first and last month's rent required to move. Yeah, it's a brutal spatial penalty. But, I mean, it makes sense why you'd be trapped if you can't afford a moving truck. The Rio de Janeiro voucher experiment really illustrates the psychological side of this, though.
Oh, the one with the grocery store vouchers.
Exactly. Researchers offered low-income shoppers a choice: a local voucher worth 60 Brazilian reals or a 70 real voucher for a store located in a wealthy upscale neighborhood. And they willingly paid a psychological ghetto tax.
Wait, so they knowingly took a financial loss, just choosing the lower value 60 real voucher to avoid the class discrimination they anticipated in the wealthier area.
They did. The mechanism here is crucial because it shows market-based cash transfers completely fail if marginalized people feel too socially threatened to actually use them in those spaces.
Okay, so it makes total sense why someone might avoid a wealthy grocery store just to, protect their peace of mind. But what happens when that exact same financial vulnerability is dragged into a courtroom where you can't just opt out?
Yeah, that brings us to 16th century England and what's called the economics of testimony. Wealthy elites would regularly coerce poor laborers into testifying in court to favor the rich. They did this through threats of eviction or these bizarre bribes, like offering them a literal load of coal.
Okay, but wait. Comparing modern courts to 16th century coal bribes feels like a massive stretch, doesn't it? I mean, we aren't literally bribing judges or witnesses with winter heating supplies anymore. Surely the justice system has evolved beyond just buying outcomes.
Well, we don't use coal, but physical liberty itself is still commodified. I mean, think about the modern cash bail system. Graham Nash famously critiqued it in his prison song. The underlying mechanism hasn't really changed.
Oh, because they sit in a cell if they can't pay.
Right. Wealthy individuals can simply buy their pretrial freedom, while the poor, who can't afford bail, basically pay for their legal defense with their physical liberty.
It's the exact same extraction, just wearing a modern suit. And it's so deeply embedded in our society that it almost feels unavoidable. Yet our sources highlight these ancient theological frameworks that were specifically designed to dismantle this exact trap.
Yeah, like the Jubilee year in the book of Leviticus.
Exactly. It completely wiped out generational debt, so a permanent underclass couldn't even form. And priests used a sliding scale for religious vows, too, ensuring a poor person's devotion wouldn't literally bankrupt them.
Yeah, and Thomas Aquinas looked at this in the Middle Ages and pushed it even further. His scholastic view on property basically argued that if someone is starving and a wealthy person holds goods in superabundance, meaning they have far more than they could ever need taking, that surplus isn't actually theft.
Wait, really? It's not considered theft?
Not according to him. Under natural law, it inherently belongs to the poor, Taking it is just restoring the divine order.
Wow. So, under that logic, a billionaire's hoarded surplus is the exact ransom required to liberate the poor. That is intense. So, what does this mean for you listening to this today? The physical world clearly extracts a heavy compounding toll just for surviving.
Right, but early Christian thinkers, what's called patristic theology, they offered this profound counterbalance through the spiritual economy. In their view, divine grace is the ultimate equalizer, and it's offered entirely without price. It mechanically cannot be bought, sold, or restricted by class.
Imagine stepping onto a treadmill that just doesn't care what shoes you wear. It leaves us with something pretty massive to ponder. How might viewing human dignity as completely untethered from financial capacity utterly upend our modern transactional world?